wonder why your home brew might have an off flavor? Usually most off flavors can be tracked back to one of three different issues. Either a sanitation problem, a formulation issue, or something to do with the way that you've stored your wort or your grains, or some other problem around time and storage. So as far as sanitation goes, poor sanitation practices or any practices that would allow bacteria to get into your wort will give you a very strong cooked vegetable sort of flavor, very strong, undesirable. If you have cleaned your equipment but for some reason you've left some bleach residue in it, then you're going to get a real medicinal flavor that's caused by a reaction to the yeast, to that chlorine or bleach-based cleaner. As far as formulation issues go, if you've got too much sugar in your batch, you might get a green apple cidery flavor. If you've been steeping your grains too long, or you're stirring the brown scum off your wort back into the brew, that's going to give you a real bitter flavor. So bitter that it's going to make your mouth pucker, so that is very undesirable. When we get into time and storage conditions, things like poor storage conditions for your grains will give you a real grassy flavor or a real musty flavor. If you've stored your wort in a bad way, or your beer, you're going to get a black bread mold perhaps forming on it, or a mildew that could grow in it. Contamination could happen if the wort is exposed to musty or damp areas during the fermentation. Let's say that you've stored your wort over 80 degrees. That's a very high temperature, and oxidation can take place, so it's going to give you like a very cardboardy or sherry flavoring, or maybe even a really strong alcohol flavor. If you've fermented at just a high temperature, not very high, you'll get a very fruity flavor, but not fruity in the way that you expect for an ale. Slightly fruity. You're going to get something very, very fruity. Maybe banana type flavor, but not slight banana, very strong banana. So what about too long in the primary fermenter? Well, if you leave it too long, you get a breakdown of fatty acids in the trub. And what that causes is a very soapy sort of flavor, and that's caused by the breakdown of the fatty acids in the trub. So the effects of light on the fermentation process too, if you're storing in clear bottles or just your primary carboy, is going to give you the skunky flavor, which you don't really want. And yeasty is just, it's not aged long enough for the yeast to really settle out. So what are some of the things you can do? Well, from a sanitation perspective, always follow proper sanitation procedures. No rinse cleaner, like a Star San, is a really good bet. Always use that, make sure everything's sanitized, everything that's going to touch your brew. Now, one thing about Star San that you'll learn, or maybe you know already, is if you put that on a counter, you're going to have real issues. It's going to eat through the countertop, no matter what you have, whether it's a Corian surface, a laminate, or marble, anything, it's going to etch. So you want to make sure that you don't do that. And if you're using plastic buckets or any plastic, make sure you're not scratching it, because that's going to harbor bacteria. And then always follow your recipe, no matter what it is. I mean, it's fun to experiment, but probably not at the sake of ruining your batch. Control your fermentation temperatures wherever possible. Make sure you're staying within the acceptable range, whether it's an ale or a lager. And use your hydrometer to ensure that your batch is completed fermenting. But lastly, and most importantly, be patient. A lot of people want to drink their brew right away, a week after bottling, and giving it some time to age is very good, and it really mellows the flavors. So if you do all those and you're patient, you'll probably turn out with having a really, really good batch of beer.
This has been a Matty Boy presentation. Say bye-bye, Matty.
Bye-bye.